and welcome to episode 167 of the Filmmakers Podcast. This is a podcast where we talk filmmaking, from indie film to studio films and everything in between. How to get them made, how to make them, and how to try not to F it up, in our very, very humble opinion. Today, you are in for a treat, an absolute treat, believe me, because we have exec producer and CEO of Signature Entertainment and a film producer in his own right. It is the wonderful Marc Goldberg. Wow. The films he's been involved with, just a few of them I'm going to mention here. The Peanut Butter Falcon, American Woman, starring Sienna Miller, Zach Adler's The Courier, Ross Clark's The Birdcatcher, the quadruple Foot Soldier series, as well as The Craze Rise and Fall, which I worked on a little bit as well. Hooligan Escape, The Hatton Garden Job, Backtrace with Sylvester Stallone, and Final Score, starring Dave Bautista and Pierce Brosnan, which Scott Mann directed, and Robin Hood the Rebellion, which was produced by Lucinda Rhodes Thacker, who also produced my movie Arthur and Merlin, Knights of Camelot, which Marc exec produced. He has a whole host of films under his belt, and it is a delight to talk to him. We go into detail about acquiring films, why they distribute certain films, the best way for you to approach distributors. We also talk about the practical steps to distribute a movie and strategies behind producing feature films, as well as understanding finance and the business side. And there's so many tips and tricks for filmmakers as well. Honestly, this is an absolute treat, because mainly Marc, he very rarely does interviews or anything like that, talks about the business side of it. So honestly, this is a rare treat for you, and you should cherish this, as well as thank him from the bottom of your heart, as we are doing now. Thank you, Marc. Speaking of Arthur and Merlin, Knights of Camelot, the trailer has dropped. It dropped on Friday. It's made quite a splash. It's been amazing. If you haven't seen it yet, I'll drop a link in the show notes, but just go to my Twitter at Giles Alderson and you will see it. It is released on July the 13th. Pre-order link is in the show notes. Very exciting. It's going to be out in pretty much a month's time. Oh yeah. All the fun and games of that to come, and we will get Lucinda back on, and perhaps Andy Roger, my DOP, to talk about making that movie, Arthur and Merlin, Knights of Camelot. So much fun, because as I've mentioned before, it rained a lot every day, and we were in a hurricane, which was so much fun. We shot in a hurricane, we made a movie in a hurricane. I can't wait for you lot to see it, and yeah, get everyone on talking about it. The wonderful joys of making a film like this, and we're having a wonderful team like Lucinda and all the guys at Signature around you to get it off the ground and get it going and help you when you're in the trenches, literally, and get the release, because that's what everyone wants. How do you get people to see it? And it's so important to have those people in the trenches with you. It really is when you're making a feature film. But getting there is really tough. It really is. You have to be kind of like a revolutionary fighter, you know, like the marches that are quite rightly happening now for the Black Lives Matter, and in the past the women's marches and animal rights marches. If you believe certain things, you need to be on them, and you need to be heard. And you will need to shout from the rooftops and pull the metaphorical plinth down, because you need to be heard. You're a filmmaker. You're a strong and powerful filmmaker, and your story is strong and powerful. And you can make a difference in the indie film and the filmmaking world. You have to have that, because no one else will do it for you. So be proud, be strong, make your script the best it can be, grab that camera, and let your voice be heard. It's your time. Be inspired. Don't waste this opportunity now to get your script right. Don't waste this opportunity to contact producers, investors. Don't wait for someone else to do it for you, because no one will. You've got to do it. You. So embrace those self-doubts, because we all have them. Be scared, right? But above all, be brave and go out and make your film. I went off on a rant there, but I mean it. I think it's so important. You can do this. So do be inspired, and do go out there now. Just whatever you can. Knock on doors. Find their email addresses on IMDb, whatever it is. But if you believe in your dream, find the right people for your project and make it happen. Okay, I've rattled on enough. Let's get to... I can't wait for you lot to hear this. This is my delightful chat with a really great guy, exec producer and film producer, Marc Goldberg. Enjoy.
Hi.
Hey, buddy. There we go. As I can hear, Mark, you are in your garden right now. Is it a beautiful day in LA right now?
It is a beautiful sunny day. Yes, it's still don't take it for granted. The weather is a glorious sort of 75 degrees. So yeah.
And what we found out when I met you in LA I don't know, a couple of months ago, it was about that, was we both live in the same area of London, or did live in the same area of London. I thought it was really nice. It was like oh wow.
That's right.
Yeah. It's kind
That's
of a
right.
nice
Yeah.
moment.
I started the company in an office half a mile from where you live.
So that's when you started Signature Entertainment, which we'll get back to. So how has this whole lockdown situation affected business, being in sales and distribution? Because I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, on the distribution side, Signature has, over the last, we started the business 10 years ago, but certainly the last 5 or 6 years planted ourselves quite firmly as a very strong platform for home entertainment. And that's really where we've positioned our company. So thankfully for us, the fact that the sort of wide theatrical business has never been something that we've pinned our business on or made it so that we need that to drive our sales and revenue. So that part has really not been affected for us. So in turn, actually business has been pretty good on the distribution side. We generally buy and acquire our content anywhere between 6 and, can be 18 months before we release it. So we've been very well stocked for content. We release a lot of films.
Yeah, how many a year? Because 5 years ago, let's say you were doing about 80 a year. Are you still around that? Are you doing more or less around that figure?
We're doing more. In the last few years. We've done over 100 films a year, and that's some of those that they get positioned in different ways. Some get a very, for us, a larger release where it gets some type of theatrical release or a day and date release where we really see those as our kind of headline titles against the fact that we then release a lot of other films where we see that there's an audience and a marketplace for them. And obviously there's demand. And as we all know, there's a lot of our customers out there, streamers and TV platforms and digital platforms that want to have new content daily, sometimes many times through a day. So we're happy to provide, them with the content that we obviously can, put our own sort of signature touch to.
Literally.
So in answer to your question, business, over the lockdown has actually been pretty good from a revenue wise. Obviously, there's the downside to it in that production has ceased, and therefore, on the producing side, which is what I do here more than the acquisition side, that's been frustrating.
I can imagine, because if you're constantly, because you are making movies all the time as well as distributing and selling them, but what happens in, like I say, a few months time or 6 months time, like you say, you acquire movies and you get movies made within 3 to 6 months or 9 months before they're released, which is great now, like you say. But what happens in 3 to 6 months time? I mean, do you think there's going to be a battle to acquire films? Do you think that films that get made in the next 3 months or something, there's going to be a bidding war for them? From your perspective, what do you think?
There's always a battle. If something has a worth, there's always going to be a battle. Do I think there will be it will continue to be that way? I like to believe that Signature has its own stamp, and that when we're talking with producers or sales agents or financiers about distributing and acquiring their project, we're a very good partner. It's not just about, obviously, the amount of money you're going to spend or the amount of marketing you're going to do. It's the love and the care that we give the title, and that bears a lot of fruit going forward and sort of may separate us from other distributors. But I guess what you're asking is, what happens in 6-9 months when there's a lack of content? Mm-hmm. I think it's probably going to take a bit longer than that. There's a lot of films that are in post-production or actually were halfway through being made, and it's a little bit more straightforward. Certainly not totally straightforward, a little bit more straightforward for them to carry on filming. So I think that over the next 6-9 months, there'll still be, for example, it would be the Cannes Film Festival would have just finished now. So all those films that would have played or be sold then are to be sold now. And similarly in Toronto and maybe even AFM. I think it's sort of next year when there'll be a lack of content in the marketplace. But then obviously on the flip side of that, we all have to believe that we will start producing again. So if you can acquire enough to keep you alive and relevant and have enough strong content on the distribution side and have your production, or certainly from our perspective, have the production business ramping up, I'm hoping it balances off. Equally, as a company that's been around for 10 years, we also have a very extensive library of nearly 1,000 films and TV shows and other things that we're working with that also helps drive the company forward. So as a company, we are thriving, and even though this is not ultimately in the long run, it's not good for anyone what's happened now, but we feel very positive that things will be more than okay in the sort of medium to long term. Yeah,
I hope so too. And I think so. I think it's really nice that you've said that positive message as well, because I think a lot of filmmakers right now are scared. I think a lot of people listening to this podcast are going, well, how am I going to get my movie made next? How is it even possible? There's going to be a big rush of crew if anything does get made. How are we going to get through all the legal side of things and wearing masks and gloves, and how is it going to come back? And I think that's very frightening for a lot of filmmakers. And it's really nice that you said that. Actually, I think we'll be all right. The things will get made and the business will carry on. It'll be different, but it'll carry on. And that is nice. It's nice to hear.
And I continue to be positive about it because I'm a half glass full person, but it is going to change, and there's no question on the production side right now, projects that we should have been shooting now, we're about to shoot. We're having to reevaluate all aspects of them, whether it's safety and sanitization, and obviously travel and bringing crew members down and looking at changing scripts to bring less people down in extra scenes. And the financing aspect is very different, in as much as obviously insurance and different aspects of that, particularly that's pertaining to cast. Look, when you're making a movie, it's a puzzle, and there are various pieces that often don't fit that you then make fit by, shaving a bit off here and there. And we've just thrown in another 25 pieces that we need to make fit. And that's what we do. And not everyone wakes up in the morning wanting to be a film producer or a distributor or a director. And it's much of the whole world that we work in, and it's certainly in the independent space, is problem solving. And this is just another throw into that. So you have to face it, and you have to look at it and think that there's a challenge ahead. And look, if you think it's going to be too tricky, then I guess it's not for you. But now certainly is the time where those problem solving skills will come in.
Absolutely agree with that. Yeah, it's so true. I want to tell our listeners how we first met. And I'm pretty sure you remember this, I'm not sure, but we were in Cannes this time last year in Cannes, and I'd met Paul Hillier, who's a insurance broker, I think the night before at a party. And he said, are you playing the football tomorrow? Because he knew we both love football. And I said, yeah, mate, yeah. And he said, I'll see you there. Great. So I turn up at this football game. I only knew one other person, Ross Clark, there. And there was Paul Hillier. And I said, mate, hello. And there was someone stood next to him. And we sort of nodded at each other. And Paul said, so what have you got here? Have you got anything at Cannes Film Festival? I said, yeah, I've got The Dare with Millennium, and I've got Arthur Merlin with Signature. And that person stood next to him and went, I financed your movie. And that was you. And that was the first time I met you.
I do remember. And I remember that you were one of the best players on the pitch. So it doesn't take too much. And then wow. I think I found out last few months ago when we spoke that you played professionally for a while, so that sort of made sense.
Yeah, though I was a goalkeeper, so that's, I was a goalkeeper at Bradford City when I was a kid all the way up. But yeah, and I think there was a really tough game that I remember, and I remember mentioning that you were very good in the centre of midfield, and you said to me you hadn't played for like 3 years. I was like, Wow. No, you were very good. Paul Hillier's a great player, and that was a good game. But I really liked our first meeting. We were on opposite teams, which was interesting.
It was a fun game. That was a fun game. Most people probably don't know that the Cannes Film Festival and AFM, it used to be Toronto and Berlin. There are the world versus Europe football matches from the film business, which has sort of been legendary. I think it's about 25, 30 years it's been going on. So I think I've played in the last. I actually haven't played that much in the last few years, but I was very much part of it for 8 or 9 years. It's a lot of fun and breaks up the.
Yes, it breaks up the monotony of the constant meetings.
And and it also brings a levelness to everyone on the. You've got people who are assistants for sales agents, tackling big movie directors. It's a good place for a level playing field.
Totally is. Yeah, there's Oscar-winning producers and stuff just getting smashed by a runner. It's amazing.
Exactly. It is fun.
It really is. It's an amazing soccer game that we get to play every year, and it was my first year, so that's how we first met, and then we met up again in LA. And Mark obviously is exec producing and selling and distributing Arthur and Merlin, which is amazing, and it's great because we delivered that obviously just in lockdown. We've got it delivered to you now, and that's super exciting. I'm looking forward to how that does. But
we're looking forward to releasing it.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. So I wanted to jump back a little bit with you and work out how you got to where you are, and then we'll get into producing and distributing and how things work. But because as we talked about this when we met, but also it was really interesting to find out your beginning. Your dad was in the business and you pretty much went around selling DVDs to supermarkets. Tell our listeners your story, because I think it's a great journey into doing what you do now.
So much of that is true. My father was in the business, so I grew up around film distribution in my childhood in the 80s when obviously it was a totally different business and there were far fewer people doing it, and he was one of the few independent guys that saw the opportunity to be able to go out and license films and put them on a brand new format called VHS. And so it was the first time ever that people were able to actually choose to watch something at home, which sounds amazing now, obviously, given you can basically watch anything you want with a push of a button. But in those days, people were going out and spending 40 or 50 pounds to own a VHS, and this is in the 80s.
Wow.
So I grew up around that and was fortunate enough to actually see lots of things and take lots of things in as a child. And then sort of leaving school at 16, I decided to go and do other things. And it was in my early 20s that I decided to start up effectively a new business with my dad. We started a new DVD business, which at the time DVD was this very sexy product that people were amazingly rebuying their VHS collection. It was obviously a far cheaper product to make. As much as I'd sort of spent my childhood in and around it, I'd not obviously worked a day within it, and sort of my thing was sales, and I was a pretty good salesman, and I decided that, or he decided more like that he would go out and license the films, and I'd go out with a blank sheet of paper and try and sell DVDs to anyone who would put them in their store. And so really the rest of that kind of is history, and we built up a few businesses, and we had some really good times. And equally, working sort of in the family business doesn't always sort of work as pragmatically as it may work in a sort of a normal environment. And so I felt when I'd been working with him for 7 or 8 years that I wanted to go and do my own thing. So after working for a couple of different companies after that, I decided to start Signature, which was a hell of a gamble, really, in a time when this is sort of 10 years later, when DVD, it reached the ceilings and then it was sort of plateauing. And I'd obviously had a lot of very strong relationships with retailers and decided that, I'm going to start my own company and quite quickly take with my incredibly tiny budget, but allow me to go to the retailers directly and say, look, I'm starting a new company. Will you help me get my product on the shelf? And as much as marketing and spending money to make people see your product is key, and obviously to the studios and to major blockbuster releases, it's absolutely part of the puzzle. When you're working in a world certainly in that day where we used to use the word DTV, which I really never really liked the phrase, but that really was what it was in sort of a direct to video product. And that's certainly, I was just about able to afford, some, let's put it this way, they weren't the best movies in the world, but they were marketable. But getting them on the shelf and getting distribution was and still is absolutely the number one key to making it work in this business.
Mm-hmm.
Whether by luck or judgment, those titles worked, and the rest was history. That allowed me to continue to grow the business and reinvest. It allowed me to buy more, and it's when you're starting a business. I think, and now I'm producing more. I liken it very much to all aspects of filmmaking and distribution and producing. And if you're out there independently doing this, you have to throw your life at it to give yourself a chance to make it successful. And that's what I did. And I spent weeks, months traveling to festivals and markets and spending a lot of time coming to Los Angeles to meet many of the sales agents and producers and financiers, and one thing leads to another, and before we knew it, 2 or 3 years later, we'd really sort of cemented a place where we'd had a great, I built the company into having a great reputation for putting the product out there, delivering, doing everything that we should be doing as a distributor, presenting it in the right way to audiences, as well as obviously working on the back end. We grew, and after 5-6 years, I had 18-19 people. We're releasing 50-60 movies a year, and we became the pioneers in day and date releasing in the UK, which we found to be a very successful model. I brought in a lot of astute people, some who had been very prominent and successful within other well-established businesses. My John Bourdion, who came to work with me after 3 or 4 years of starting the company, had been running the home entertainment at E1 and was part contender. And he now, whilst I moved here to LA 3 years ago, he now runs the day-to-day business. Liz, who obviously you worked with and who looks after a lot of the UK production as well, but she came to us from Sky, who obviously we worked with a lot and is a great partner to us. And she came over to be our head of acquisitions and has led that team and really, worked maybe less over the last few years, but her and I worked very, very closely together. And, I taught her a few things and she taught me a few things, and that's really been the way that the business, has flourished. It's the film business. It really isn't rocket science. It's, everyone has a view, and no one's, when it comes to taste, no one's view is wrong. And so, the marketing team knowing what the acquisitions guys are doing, and the finance team obviously being all over acquisitions, and all aspects of the business know what each other is doing. And I think that's crucial.
I really like that, and I think that's really interesting insight into it all. So let's talk about someone who's got a film. What would you look for in someone's film? And I know that you've changed from, you definitely did more sort of action film, dual action led, gangster led. Now you've got these beautiful films like Peanut Butter Falcon and American Woman, award-winning movies that you've developed into a signature, into this big brand. But what is it that you specifically look for we'll go for distribution angle first and sales angle rather than you as a producer, and we'll come back to producing side. But in terms of signature, what is it you look for?
Yeah, I mean, things have changed very much from when we started to now, and that's just generally, obviously in life, things change all the time, but the quality of the film has to stand up. It's not always about, so-and-so is in it, so we can just make that work. It doesn't always work that way, sadly, anymore. In a strange way, it would be somewhat easier if it did, but it's working the way it should do, where a good film should get the platform that it deserves to be released in the way that it should. For example, you talk about American Woman. That's a perfect example of a title of 2 or 3 years ago that we just would not have been in a position to really either distribute, either work with that particular sales agent or or have it as something that we would want to distribute, because it's a drama set in a small American town about a woman who's trying to find her daughter, and it's really not a log line or something that we feel would be jumping up and down about. But we, in fact, it was actually myself and Liz. We went to see that at Toronto Film Festival, and we knew, in this world where that quality of film, where and it ended up getting 5-star reviews everywhere, and we worked with Sienna Miller, and she came over and got behind the film, and it proved to be a stonkingly successful title for us, and so that kind of and that's happening all the time.
And was that a surprise for you in terms of, you took a chance on this film and it was amazing, and you saw that when you watched it, but did you do anything different with the marketing? Did you do what was it that made it that success, and why was it because I as soon as I saw it, I was like, this is an amazing film, brilliant, well done for choosing it.
You believe that the best case scenario is that a lot of people are going to see this, including the press, and we're going to get the support from the talent, and that is obviously, and if enough people like it, then enough people will want to watch it, and that's what happened. Films like American Woman aren't what we're looking for all the time, but equally, we've had tremendous success with things like the Rise of the Foot Soldier series, which is the other, if you like, I'm not saying it's the other end of the spectrum in terms of quality, because in fact, in the UK, there's probably a bigger audience for that type of film than there is over and above a film like American Woman. Mm-hmm. Coming back to your answer, what do we look for? We look for films that will reach either as broad an audience as possible, or if they have a niche audience, that niche has to be, that niche sometimes is thought of as small, but that niche can be big. And that niche audience, for example, for the Rise of the Foot Soldier series, is a hardcore, committed audience of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who want a piece of escapism. And so, and then, come back to your film, it's, with Arthur Merlin, it slips straight in there. It's like, why would we do that? Well, it's a clear target that, if we can produce something and make something and distribute something that we can all stand behind and that we're proud of as a film, something like that, where we it's not cast driven, but it's driven by the theme and the story, and something that's relatively well known. It's again something that hopefully something like that. It's a clear target as to what we're trying to hit.
Got you. That makes sense, and that's very well put. So for someone who's made their film, they've gone out there, they've raised the money, it's an indie film, and they've done it themselves. How do they move forward to get to someone like you? What's the process then for them to find you and go, hey, here's my film, please help me distribute it or sell it?
Well, many do. So many do,
Yeah. And is it just emails? Is it cold calls? How does it work for you mainly?
Yeah, I mean, on the distribution side, a lot of filmmakers, however sort of green they may be to it, it doesn't take too long to find out how, you type into Google, how do I sell my film? Most are directed towards sales agents.
Yes.
Most films are presented to us through a sales agent. That's not to say that we aren't inundated with projects, both new and finished films from filmmakers, and not to discourage filmmakers, but ultimately, there are hundreds of sales agents out there looking for product all the time for them to sell across the world. And if it doesn't come via a sales agent, then we obviously may question the validity and the quality of it, because that is generally the first port of call. That's not to say, for example, that that we haven't taken things directly from producers, but a sales agent is really the gateway for probably 90% of the product we buy, and I'd assume probably most distributors and studios.
See, that's interesting, because a lot of indie filmmakers, they know that they can bring a sales agent on, of course, and actually it's sometimes the easier route to the distribution. They know the people like yourself and other distributors, etc. But then they lose out on any kind of, often any money back, or it's much harder to get their money back, whereas if they go direct to distributors, it's sometimes easier. Again, it's not easy. You have to understand the market. You have to understand how to sell your film. But there is ways of doing it, and it's really interesting. I think the whole process of getting a film out there. It's easy to go make a film. I say it's easy. People can go make a film, but getting people to see it is another thing, and that's what you excel in. Is like you mentioned there, your expertise is getting people to see the film. That's what Signature are very good at, which is why I'm delighted, to make Arthur and Merlin with you guys, because I know that you're going to get eyeballs on it. You're going to distribute it in the right way, like you do with your movies. So now someone's got their indie film and they're not going to a sales agent, but they want to come to you direct. Is it like, say, cold calls? Are you looking at those type of movies now? I know you're much bigger than that, but let's say back in the day, is this something that, what's the best approach is basically what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, I mean, look, we have in London, we have 3 people looking at films, obviously with Liz, every day. I don't think there's anything that we just dismiss. Anything that comes in, and maybe this is slightly different to anyone else, we will take a look at anything, and whether it was 5 years ago or yesterday, because you never quite know. I heard of a title that we acquired last week that was way down on a list somewhere that had been discarded, I think, for 2 or 3 markets. And one of the guys in the team in London said to me, "What about this?" And we took a look at it, and we ended up acquiring it. And we actually distribute about 50, 60 movies in Australia as well. Wow. I'm just giving you that anecdote, that stuff does sometimes fall through the cracks, and we will look at anything. And it's difficult for filmmakers because, I know it from a producing side, and obviously you know it even more so from a directing side, where you get totally wedded to a project and it's difficult to be unbiased. But I think you as a filmmaker need to really ask the question, would this film stand up and be good enough alongside the movies that are shown on the SVOD and pay TV platforms? Everyone's watching those movies, and I'm not talking about the blockbuster studio movies. I'm talking about other independent films and the production value that you can see on that. And obviously, cast and cinematography and all the other things are important. But if you hand on heart think it's going to be good enough for that, and that's really sort of the base play these days, the transactional business and trying to get people to rent and buy your film, don't get me wrong, is still hugely important to our business. But the base play to be able to work with SVOD and pay TV partners is crucial. And so, what one has to remember is that when we're working with our TV and SVOD partners, different to the days when we used to go and sell DVDs to supermarkets, is that sadly, the way that it was, is that a supermarket buyer, a week before that, may have been buying toothpaste, has no idea anything to do with film, sure. and B, almost certainly will never watch any more than 5% of the films that he would buy to put on the shelf. Whereas if you're talking with the partners like we're talking with at Netflix or Amazon or Sky or Channel 5 or ITV or, Apple and Virgin and BT and all of these guys, they're watching the movies that we're presenting to them. Mm-hmm. So, they need to feel that if someone's paying their $10 a month for Netflix, that they are going to, feel that everything they watch reaches a certain quality threshold. And I think that's what independent filmmakers really need to ask themselves is, can they make their movie so it stands up alongside those as a worst case? And don't get me wrong, I live the other side of it on the production side, where we're all trying to shoot for the stars and make the absolute best version and be recognized for it and get credit for it. But as an aspiring indie filmmaker, I think people have to just kind of sometimes get real with what it is they're trying to make in a world where it's very easy to see what you need to compare it to. Mm-hmm.
I think the whole distribution world for filmmakers is really hard. They don't teach it enough. We don't understand a lot of it. We don't understand the back end of it, if you like. And I think the more we can understand that, the better we will be as filmmakers. If you can get a name in it, well, you're more likely to sell it. If it's a horror, not necessarily, but it does make a difference understanding your market and knowing what you're presenting it to. If you're going to make a drama, you might need a big name in it to, to get to you guys and actually make a dent in the film world. I think it's really tough.
I mean, look, it's tough, and I don't I don't like to sort of pour negativity onto kind of what is people's hopes and dreams and aspiring to be, because without question, those people's hopes and dreams and those aspirations, some people will get there. What we are contending with, as well as obviously, people watching 3-minute, 2-minute videos on social media and spending hours in a TikTok trance or whatever it might be.
So true.
And here we are busting a gut trying to make an independent horror movie or an Arthur Merlin or a $25 million Dave Bautista action movie. One has to continue to come back to saying how relevant is that going to be in the world going forward. So it's just a question of trying to be real, but from a distribution perspective, we can't ignore all the other things that are out there that are fighting for eyeball space.
If you don't mind giving us some, before we get into your producing, to talk about the sort of the best ways you feel that you like to distribute movies, the best, just for people to know, to understand from an indie filmmaker's perspective. Just break it down for us. Don't have to go into too much detail, but what you do when you distribute a movie. If you go through those steps for us, that would be really useful.
Well, the practical steps.
Yes.
Typically, these days, more than in the past, we will acquire a movie either once it's finished, so once we've seen it, either a screening or a market, or we will buy product once we've seen something, like a trailer or a promo or some footage. There are cases where we will pre-buy films at a script level, but invariably, in this world, that's become far more riskier.
Would some names have to be attached to that point, or a big name director for that?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. I mean, we typically may pre-buy 2 or 3 films a year, and then the rest are in the other categories. Obviously, if other distributors have pre-bought them, then we can't buy them. But in the UK, the marketplace is very much open generally for finished films. So once we finish a film, once we buy a film, then we look at the scale of the type of release, and if it's something that we feel we can put an investment into to market it in a bigger way, and where there is talent involved who will come over or come over, or whether they're in the UK, do some press for us, we will typically try and arrange or schedule the release around that, the time that we can have their involvement, and then from there, whether we're working with the cinemas or going straight to the digital platforms and the physical formats. So whether that be then theatrical to digital to home entertainment to then going to TV platforms and SVOD platforms and Amazon and all the various places that we can obviously try and monetize that title throughout the life cycle of its license. And obviously, just going back to the start, is when we're negotiating the contract, an important factor is how long we're licensing that title for, that allows us to make a judgment as to how much money we can obviously put down to start with, which is typically known as an MG, or equally, a lot of sales agents and producers and distributors want to work with us to share in the profits, and therefore, it's typically not about the MG and more about a profit share perspective. And I think it's really important to note from a Signature perspective is, even though we do acquire and release a lot of product, we distribute it and market every single title in, whether it's given a full scale campaign or even a sort of a smaller campaign. We aim to do that, and it's very different to the aggregation business. And I think I listened to one of your shows a while ago where you're talking to people who were sort of in that business or had been affected by that business, and obviously the aggregation business is a different, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's a business that works and it's sort of a more of a factory model where films get just sort of put through a system and through a pipeline, but don't have the sort of the same approach that we have, where we do look at each film genuinely as sort of each one is one of our babies, and we want to we want it to grow up and flourish and be successful for everyone. And I think, that's what we do and that's what filmmakers and sales agents and producers see, that's what we do on each title.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And just to clarify what an aggregator is for people, if you don't mind.
Well, an aggregator is fundamentally, if you've made a film and you can't get distribution or your sales agent hasn't been able to sell it to various territories, an aggregator will effectively take your film invariably. I mean, we're not one, so it's not business that we predominantly work in, but you may even need to pay them to take your film to then put it up. And when I say put it up, so to make it available through as many digital platforms in that territory. Invariably, you as the producer or filmmaker would have to do your own artwork and do your own trailer and do your own marketing. And it's literally that you're using them as a gateway to try and get revenue. But sadly, very few of those titles actually produce that much revenue because, naturally, like coming back to what I said earlier, putting your product in a place where it can be seen is crucial. So being a distributor with a continual schedule of quality product like Signature has means that when we are working with our partners, invariably and typically, we're able to get, really good positioning on these platforms, which is what they, and we deserve it because the product is good enough and that there's a, continual range of that. Whereas obviously from an aggregation perspective, if your film, it wouldn't happen with Arthur and Merlin because it will get great positioning. But let's say, you weren't working with us and you had to put your film through an aggregate and your film came out next Friday, you'd go on iTunes and you'd hope you'd see it. But if you're going through an aggregator, likelihood is the only place you're going to see it is if you type it in. And for a movie that's not being released theatrically, how many people were typing in that movie that week? Very few.
Yeah, absolutely. There are some good aggregators out there, and there are some who aren't. So just be careful. Film Hub are very good. I like them a lot. I've heard good things, and they don't charge a percentage up front. So just do your homework, everyone. If you're going down that route, you've got a film and you can't get sales, you can't get distribution. It is a way to sell your film. It is a way to get your film out there, but you have to do the work. Facts. But go look up Film Hub, and you'll see what it's all about. Let's jump into your producing side. When was the moment when you said, okay, I love sales and distribution and this is amazing, but when was the moment you said, I'm actually going to start producing my own movies and step up into that direction? Can you remember the time?
I can remember the fact that there wasn't a moment.
Right.
Sadly. It was actually more by
just by being.
It was more by default, default than design. Actually, I never, even when I started to see Signature growing, I didn't say, "Oh, I want to go and produce films." It all looked rather thankless and difficult. And going and acquiring film, not that distributing them and picking the right films is easy, but producing them just seemed a far harder thing to do. But really, what happened is that as the business started to grow and we saw that to take it to another level, which would really mean a huge investment. And when I mean huge investment, hundreds of millions to turn the business from what we were into a theatrical distributor. And the independent space in the theatrical marketplace in the UK, for anyone who may know, is brutal and is a graveyard of companies that have tried and failed. And so we tried. I actually did try with a couple of films and failed miserably. And thankfully the business could take the hit. But it was a question of me sort of being the person that I was, just kept wanting to find ways to grow the business. And what actually happened is that the robbery took place in Hatton Garden. And me being someone who kind of thinks, oh, that would make a great movie, as did probably half the country and all the other film producers out there, thought that would be great. And so I started to sort of prod around and see how we could get a film made. And I was going to be working with someone else. We'd set out to try and make the version that Working Title made, and that was our plan. And then what happened is that Working Title announced it, and we were like, well, we can't compete with that. And someone else approached me and said, I can make a Hatton Garden film, and and we can do it at a really good price.
Yeah.
So really good price.
Yeah.
Prices make it sound like it's something at
£10.
a supermarket. No, we could do it at a really good budget, a budget that makes sense.
Yes.
And they felt quite strongly that given the pace that it was moving at, that they could get some pretty decent talent. So we agreed to finance the movie and play some involvement in the production. And the people that we worked with at the time did a fantastic job.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
The producer who I worked with on that, Ben Jakes, who we're actually working with. Yeah, we're actually working with him on something else. He and Ronnie, who did a fantastic job on the directing. They exposed me to a fair bit of what it could take to make a film that ended up looking really pretty good, and we ended up getting some really good cast for.
Matthew Good is amazing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Matthew Good and Larry Lamb, and Phil Daniels, Jodie Richardson, and I guess why we felt so strongly that it was something that we could do was that we knew that there was going to be a marketplace for it, and that if we could, taking a distribution perspective and putting that into the producer's seat and saying, well, why does this work? What do the numbers really look like? Because we're going to be controlling this film around the world, not just the UK. And it worked. We worked with the sales agent on that, and they sold the world. And we did, it became, it's in our, I think, our top 5 signature ever releases in terms of revenue, and it became a fantastic title for us. And ultimately is kind of perennial because, it just will keep selling and selling and selling. And that's really sort of what turned me onto it. And I think that the next film that I then got involved with is it's a whole sort of there's a whole story behind it, and that's really what gave me the full hands-on exposure of producing a film, and then which is Final Score, and then it was sort of from there that I soon fast started to realize that the way to grow the business was to start producing our own content rather than trying to compete with the studios and work in the theatrical marketplace. And don't get me wrong, 3 years later, after producing Final Score and a handful of other films,
the Courier,
and we were due to shoot 2 or 3 films this summer, which obviously now are going to be delayed and pushed back, but this angle and this pivot, certainly, in the world that we're living in, is the one that it certainly made sense. Again, though, producing films and being sort of the lead producer and putting all the pieces together is ultimately, it can be a very lonely and thankless place a lot of the time. But controlling your own destiny, which is we're very, I am and the people that I work with on the production side, we're very adamant that we own the IP of pretty much everything that we do. We finance our development totally within the company.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. You've got this wonderful eye that you understand what sells. You understand the marketplace. You spent time going around selling, VHSs in supermarkets or whichever shops you could get to, and suddenly you're now seeing that as a whole as the producer coming in and making something like Final Score with Dave Bautista, which is an incredible movie. We had Scott Mann on the podcast, of course, and then The Courier with Zach Adler, director, on the podcast as well, with Gary Oldman in that. And you seeing it from a different angle, you're going, well, what sells? If I get this person in, that means this movie I can sell it in this territory, Are you thinking of it in that sense then? You're going, well, from as soon as the concept comes to you, and you're looking at it, right, how can we sell this movie? We need that territory, so should we get this person in? Are you thinking of it like that, like a strategy?
Yes, you absolutely have to think of it as a strategy. Sadly, it's not just as easy as let's just come up with a great concept, find a great script, and I'll go and knock on, the door of the agent, and their actor's going to say yes, and we're going to go and make a movie. And
sure.
The X plus Y equals that to allow the formula to work. But in essence, yes, there is a strategy there, and I think really fundamentally now living here a few years and developing the projects that I have and being put into place, and I'm working with all different sorts of directors and I'm working with talent that brought projects to me that they wanted to star in. And, it really, really fundamentally for me comes down to the concept and the material.
Right.
Again, if you take it back to those days gone past, making sort of B movie with sort of A minus B plus stars in to try and make them, as a producer, that really can be a thankless task where you're running around and the film doesn't turn out great, and actually no one's really made any money apart from the actors that starred in it and maybe the people who financed it. So what I have made very important to our strategy is that it, again, and I come back to the question you asked me as a filmmaker, and though I'm certainly not a director, I'm on that creative side now, and we have to make sure that it's going to be something that we can stand behind and that's going to be good enough. But that's not to say that it has to be an Oscar-winning movie. We have, there's a project, for example, with Dave Bautista, who's become a friend of mine, and we've been working on a project. We've got the writer of the Fast and Furious franchise, who's writing it right now. We're working sort of the three of us are working together alongside my producing partner, Sarah, who works with me here. And we've been working on that project for 18 months. And that's just, sadly, that's just how long it takes to get it into a place where, if you're going to go and raise or find the financing to put 20, 30, $40 million into a movie, it's got to be great. It can't even just be okay or good enough. So
it's got to be, and that's even with Dave Bautista starring in it. You're still going. It takes time because you've got to develop it and get it to the right place.
Absolutely, and he wants it to be the best it can be, obviously. So, it's a lot of patience. But equally, it's not just about a $30 million Dave Bautista action movie. And this is something interesting for the people listening. I recently did a joint venture partnership with a studio who had a need for an amount of movies that they've asked us to produce for them that aren't driven by talent, that are purely driven by concept, that are going to be in sort of a relatively low budget range, that allows us to be flexible with all sorts of things when you're not constrained by the fact that you need to get X, Y, and Z in it. So, we signed that deal just the end of last year. We have 4 movies that we've all had greenlit that are, actually will probably be shot much sooner than anything else, because those movies where it's not totally cast contingent are actually going to be easier to make in this world. So, we are constantly looking for that type of high concept. Contained is a word that lots of people use, but it does make sense, obviously, certainly in this world where you can bring certain elements of the budget down. So whether it's a comedy and action, a sort of relatively low budget horror film, it's again having a broad perspective on the marketplace, but equally every project has to be worth doing on its own merit.
Yes. And do people approach it, like you said there, that people are now coming to you, which is nice with projects and ideas and established writers. Is this happening a lot more? Are you getting unsolicited stuff that you find, or is it pretty much people now and developing it that way?
Oh no, on that side we get a lot of material that's sent. I mean that's slightly different to obviously a filmmaker coming to us on distribution side, where I said inevitably they do go through the sales agent, but from a production standpoint, I receive dozens a day from writers and producers and directors who obviously have a dream to make a film.
Yes. And what is it that gets through the door sometimes? What is it that gets you to read them? Is it what stands out, I suppose? What should people do?
The stuff that comes through represented talent generally is something we take a look at, because they've obviously put themselves in a position to get representation.
Yes.
So, that's being honest, that's generally kind of what goes to the top of the list, unless it's a writer or a director that we know well, or that we've done stuff with before, or or that is well known and has some credits and that stuff, sent stuff through. But that said, there are still projects that we have taken serious looks at that have come through unsolicited. That just they may not even come to me. They may have come to Sarah, or they may have come to the team in London. And we take a serious look at it, and then we can sort of then say how we would look at doing it or take it on. There's of the, I think it's 9 or 10 movies in our development slate. I think 1 or 2 came through that means, and the others are projects invariably that we've been more proactive in either chasing or optioning or developing from scratch ourselves with talent that were sort of our ideas.
Yes, fine. That's really interesting. And for people to approach, do they kind of just find Signature online and they send their unsolicited work to you? I'm sure if someone wants to find me, they'll find me. There you go. There it is. There's a challenge. What did you find within the producing when you started it? Did you think it'd be as hard as it is? Especially you mentioned there it is lonely, and it is. It's really tough for filmmakers. No,
I didn't think it'd be as hard as it is. I have this interesting juxtaposition where I probably 50-50 working on the distribution side and the production side, and the distribution side is a constant flow of stuff. It's buying, it's selling, it's marketing, it's we're traveling around watching films all the time. And the production side, particularly when you're developing, is a slog. It's waiting for a draft, and then doing the notes and doing the contracts and finding a date and finding the times and finding making all the pieces fit together. And sometimes one piece can fall down and the whole pack of cards can fall down, and it can be extremely frustrating. So there's a lot of dark days. So you ask, why do you do it? And ultimately, like I said, if we can build the production business and own our own content, that we believe is going to be what the world wants, then that is a when you do get that phone call from whichever piece of the puzzle that allows you to greenlight your film, it is, I'm not going to deny, it's a wonderful feeling. It really is.
Yep.
It's a true high five moment, and
totally,
and it feels worth it.
It does. That's why I mentioned that moment in Cannes when you said to me, I financed your movie. And the reason why I wanted to talk about that and mention it is because it never happens. It's such a joy that you meet anyone in the world that says, I financed your movie, because what an amazing thing. What an amazing moment, amazing thing to happen to anyone, any filmmaker. I financed your movie. That's amazing. It means that you've made a movie or you're making a movie, and it means that someone believed in the project enough to give you money to make the movie. So yeah, I totally agree. Those moments are just few and far between, and they are special, and it made me feel so good, even though it was the funny moment. It was just like, this is incredible and special. And, it is frustrating for a lot of us as filmmakers, but you can get through it and you can fight. And what you mentioned there about, the dream is kind of what you're doing is producing, distributing, and having this model. It's exactly what I want. I want to be there too. I want to be doing all of it, controlling it, helping things get made, and being in that position where you can greenlit or you can help things get greenlit is must be a great place to be. And well done it's an incredibly impressive position you've built up for yourself, and I'm very proud of you, and it's been a joy to meet you and talk to you, and I love that you guys are making Arthur and Merlin, and I got to make it with you because I love everyone at Signature. I think it's a delight to spend time with them.
They love you, we love you. There you go. Yeah. So it's a mutual feeling, mutual
pat on the back society. What about some tips after that? Now gone slightly red. Tips and tricks for filmmakers then, and producers and people. Want anything you can advise them that you went, if only I'd known that. Oh God, why don't filmmakers know this now? Is there anything that's always bothered you, or something you'd like to help filmmakers out there listening?
Well, I think they separate filmmakers into directors and producers, right? So and writers, mentioned this earlier, but if you are writing something, particularly if it's on spec or you've got your own idea, if you have this big grand idea that's going to cost tens of millions of dollars to make, be really true to yourself that you think that has a pathway to be made, and do some investigation as to how these things get made. You go and write something, and then you turn it into a producer, and you say, "Oh, I've got this great idea, and it's this, and we're going to do these explosions. It's going to have this going on, and we're going to get this talent, and we're going to do all this." It's almost certain that it will never happen, because that they just haven't really thought about what is needed to put that together. So again, it's sort of coming back to just giving yourself a reality check as to what it is you're trying to achieve. I think from a producer standpoint, obviously now having made a bunch of films and being involved with a load more going forward, understanding how the finance works and understanding, what finance costs you to your film to make it work is look, it's something that you wouldn't know until you start doing it. But it's something that I think people really need to understand. It's all very well saying, even a producer going and getting a budget done, but someone's got to pay for that film, and that money doesn't come for nothing. And so that can change and shape a lot once you start getting into conversations with financiers. So I think that's something that, I wasn't aware of just because I wasn't part of that side of the world. And now it's, what I deal with every day.
Yep, I totally agree. Business side of it as filmmakers, we're too creative and we're not thinking about the business side enough, and you have to. I think it's vital. That's some great advice. Marc, this has been amazing. Honestly, this has been really cool. It's been really great to talk to, someone from your side of things with the distributing sales and also producing. Really, really interesting. Thank you so much.
No problem. Good to speak to you.
So there you go. That was Marc Goldberg. How amazing was that? Remember, you can go out there and make your indie film. You can make it happen, but know who your audience is. And if you're lucky enough to rise up and do well, as Marc has, it's your duty to send the elevator back down. We are back next Tuesday. As always, go to the Filmmakers podcast and go like our merch, because we've got all the merch now, and get involved with the other 100 and nearly 70 podcasts now that are out there, and let people know that you like this podcast. Spread the word. That is so important. Marc, you are a legend and a gentleman, and it's been an honor. Thank you so much.
No problem. Good to speak to you, Giles.
And you, buddy. Take care. And take care, everyone, and we will see you next Tuesday. All the best, everyone. Go make your film, make it happen. Bye.